Yeah, because I also think it's crazy to me. I mean, I always kind of assumed that it happened a lot earlier than in like the 1800s than it did, or maybe even like
Mm, mm,
late 1700s or something. But when you think about it in the scheme of
yeah,
things, it's about 50 years until World War I, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
It's
think how
not long
different the
at all.
world is then.
Yeah,
America
it's
had a
amazing.
civil war half a century before.
It's extraordinary, and there were still veterans meeting up at the seventh. There was a 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, which was in
Mm,
1863. There was a 75th anniversary in 1938, at which there were surviving veterans present.
yeah,
So this is a modern war, and it's the first war in which photographs are
yeah,
being
yeah,
regularly
yeah.
taken. So there's this extraordinary documentary that I mentioned, The American Civil War by Ken Burns, and he invents a thing that editors will the world over will know called the Ken Burns effect, which is where you
Mm,
take a still image. And on Final Cut Pro, you can literally press a button and it will give you the Ken Burns effect. You take a still image and you put a camera over it and you move the camera across the still image to
mm,
create the feeling of movement.
yeah.
And in concert with an extraordinary amount of sort of sound design, music, all the rest of it, you get this incredibly vivid sense that you're really there and it's really happening, even though you're just looking at a still image. So it's an extraordinary effect. But photography has just come in, so it's one of the most photographed. Well, at the time, it's obviously the only photograph war, but I think it's one of the most photographed wars even now because people were so excited by the invention of the camera that they were just photographing everything.
People got a new gadget and they really wanted to test it out. So
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So
yeah,
no, extraordinary. So and it's the first war I think in which machine guns are used. Um, it's the first war in which ironclad naval vessels are
yeah.
used. So basically, so I mean, even little things like pockets that we have in our trousers now. That was the first time that was done was in the American Civil War. The northern troops were given pockets in which to hold their various kind of personal items
Mm.
to make life easier, so they weren't sort of carrying a million things. So there's so many things that come down to us, modern inventions that were from the Civil War. So it is an incredibly modern war in that sense.
Yeah, it's one of the unfortunate realities of the world we live in that war brings such innovation and such kind of, you know,
Yeah,
creativity
technology. Yeah, yeah.
in terms of technology, in terms of like
Sad that
medicine,
it
all
has
those
to
other
be.
kinds of
Yeah,
things. Why does it have to
yeah,
be at
yeah.
the cost of like so many millions of people dying? Like it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, yeah. It's a sad
Um,
reality, but it's true. It's
yeah,
well, necessity is the mother of invention.
yeah, yeah,
When
yeah,
you need a thing is when that thing gets done. You're not gonna do something unless you've got a pressing need to do it. You're not going to
yeah.
commit enormous amounts of economic capital to something if there's not a pressing reason to do so. And when there is, that's when you
Was
get invention.
I also see the same kind of sentiment towards like space travel and stuff as well. Like
Mm.
people criticizing, oh well, why aren't we doing more to like do stuff for our current planet, rather than trying to leave it and spend all this money on trying to go somewhere else. And it's like, well,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
think we wouldn't have things like the X-ray if we didn't have space travel. Like
Mm.
some of the research that's done in space, whether it's studying other planets, whether it's kind of figuring out, how to survive in hostile environments,
Mm.
or developing
Yeah, yeah.
machinery to see deeper into space and things like that. These are all
Mm.
things that we can use.
And it all
So
and it all essentially came from a kind of somewhat childish space race between the Americans and the Russians in the Cold
well,
War.
yeah, for culture, for
So
I
it's all
mean, yeah, it's an
so
interesting.
it
I mean,
all
again, it's a whole kettle of fish topic that we can definitely have a whole
yeah, yeah,
episode on. I
yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
No,
but
it's fascinating.
it's also fascinating that the Soviets actually had the upper hand on the Americans in terms of the space
Mm.
race up until the moon
Yeah.
landing. So
Mm.
they beat them to everything else pretty much.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
as we know from history, people only care when you get to the big finish line at the end.
yeah, exactly.